For the longest time, I thought that the knowledge I have today was solely a result of my actions alone, an individual pursuit. Yet, as I've gone through my entire life, the different stages I've encountered, it's become evident that everything I have a stance on, such as religion, morals, and culture, were not necessarily shaped in isolation, but rather accumulated through the essence of others around me. All of this begs the question: who or what entered the room while the foundation of my mindset was being laid out? And so this is my journey, a philosophical one, an attempt to trace the footsteps left by others' impact on my thinking today. But to understand this as a whole, let's go back in time a bit. As a child of Indo-Guyanese parents, my identity was purely dependent on the output of my elders around me in my childhood, specifically my parents. They wanted me to have every opportunity they weren't given, and although I was not pressured to be the most successful student ever, giving my best and acing that math test or joining all these school clubs was my way of returning the love. And from that, I gained skills pertaining to a balanced work ethic, time management skills, and stayed diligent in my studies throughout my academic career. So through my family, I was able to establish the first bits of my identity that shaped my thinking today. Similarly, in Act 1, Scene 3 of William Shakespeare's Hamlet, Polonius advises his son Laertes to remain truthful to others, as well as his core values, evident in the line, "This above all, to thine own self be true." Just as my parents strived for me to be the best version of myself, Polonius wanted the same for Laertes, both being done in an encouraging and wise manner. Growing up an only child meant that the only real blueprint I had for relationships was the one I built alongside my parents. So between the ages of 5 to 11, as someone who was and still is constantly curious about the world, I realized that the only way to gain knowledge was to receive it from multiple perspectives, aka making friends. And although not all friendships are bound to work out, it taught me to 1. Learn how to persevere through the tough times, and 2. Empathize with the people around me. In a meaningful relationship where growth occurs, there is often an acceptance of flaws by both parties. There must also be mutual trust, as well as respect. This may be my life, but it is also the people in my life's first time living. At the age of 12, the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, all my interactions went from face-to-face to remote. The entire world was put on hold. And because while my friends had their own families to interact with and be occupied with, I started to develop this crippling fear of loneliness, which led to me to also developing an immense fear of death. And this mentality put me in a bad spot for months, especially as an only child with no interaction with her peers or just anyone in her age in general. And this is where an era of loneliness and overthinking began. What is going to happen when people close to me pass away? What happens after death? I'm never going to be ready to leave this life behind. I feared this unknown biological phenomenon. This is when I started to observe more things in my daily life, in hopes of making sure I took in everything before the day I died. But in between that, I started taking a longer look at the religious rituals my parents performed every day. Being a little more curious every time, eventually this led to me taking part in these rituals and learning why we do them, such as artis, where a wick is soaked in ghee and offered to deities. In this case, the ones at my altar at home. Over time, the fear of death instilled in me started to fade, as I took more time to learn about Hinduism, especially in the areas where death was mentioned. In my religion, it is believed that instead of heaven or hell, the departure of a soul from its body after death leads to a cycle of reincarnation over and over, until the final destination is the soul assuming an identity between itself and the ultimate spiritual goal, called moksha, an eternal divine awakening. Now, although I more so believe in the scientific reality of death, where consciousness ends as the brain ceases to function, going to the altar and building a relationship with the gods and goddesses there, such as Durga Ma, Krishna Bhagwan, and Lakshmi Mata, made me feel heard and seen, because although I learned not to fear death, for death is inevitable, it shaped my thinking in a way where now I feel more safe in times of fear, knowing that I can pray to them. My moral compass didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was handed down to me in the form of religion. Allowing Hinduism to be the foundation for my morals taught me about Dharma. Dharma is the contextual guide that was founded deeply rooted in the Vedas, ancient Hindu scriptures, which distinguish between good and evil. An example of Dharma in my life would be that growing up, my parents told me not to take from others without permission. But if I did, I should need to be truthful and apologize. This reflects Dharma because not only does it focus on right versus wrong, but also on taking accountability on how your actions affect others. Therefore, since Dharma will vary from person to person, Dharma allows you to think about the bigger picture and that your connections with others alter your way of thinking. It has personally taught me accountability over fear. Once again, this relates to Hamlet in a line from Act 3, Scene 1, where it says, "Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles." Hamlet says this because of his conflicting expectations to protect Denmark as a prince, as well as to avenge his father. Like Dharma, his conflict shows that morality isn't about following strict rules, but more so understanding that every choice has consequences. After pondering about my relationship with religion and people, I started to think about how it all ties into our individual relationship with the universe. Through spending a life surrounded by friendships, family, and religion, I began to view the universe not as something I'm living in, but instead something I live amongst. The nature of it is not known to us all, but to me, the universe is a system of circumstances and consequences in which we must find balance within. As humans, we naturally give and take. I refer to this as dynamic equilibrium. In chemistry, dynamic equilibrium is a state in a chemical process where a reaction can go forward and backwards at the same rate. In other words, there is balance. To exist amongst the universe, there must be balance in how others impact you and you impact others. When we are presented with choices, we are not able to control how it plays out, but rather how we respond. And by doing this and shaping our path in this universe of unpredictable phenomenons, I have grown to believe that we cannot control the universe itself, but instead how we contribute to its growth. My relationship with the universe is transactional, because once it provides me with opportunities and challenges to overcome for growth, in return, I provide it with a response to the choices I make in which I strive to act upon in a way that is beneficial to the both of us. Humans know what we know through individual experience, but also the influence upon it, bringing us back to the idea of relationships. Today, I would describe my thinking as more open-minded. Earlier in my life, it was my parents who helped shape my thinking through my identity, then my friends, then religion. By embracing relationships with all of those, I realized that acquiring true knowledge does not exist. Knowledge is always up to interpretation, meaning that if you choose to believe in something, you do, and if you don't believe in something, you don't. This itself proves that certainty is but an illusion to humans. It will change on the amount of perspectives from the relationships that you are willing to allow into your life. In Act 3, Scene 1, Hamlet's famous "to be or not to be" is the dilemma of uncertainty Hamlet experiences, for whether he should persevere through life and suffer, or to face death and be followed with the uncertainty of it. While I allowed new relationships and perspectives to enter my life, the more certain I became with the idea that we cannot know anything for certain as humans. In contrast to Hamlet, where he isolates himself from his community and questions life versus death, allowing a mindset where only absolute answers give him a sense of certainty. And this is what traps him inside his own head. Through my philosophical journey, it has taught me that we don't always need to have a singular, straightforward answer to questions, or our identity, or why things happen the way they do. Instead, we should just keep the door to the room in our mind open, because what matters is the perspective you take through the connections around you.